Hi guys, DevilHunterXYZ, and this time another movie review. Recently I went to see Solo, a Star Wars movie, and essentially it's another anthology film taking place between episodes 3 and 4, I guess also years before Rogue One, but it mainly focuses on Han Solo and his origins and how he ended up becoming the world famous pilot that he is. But and it kind of in a way, the film itself is pretty much what you expect it to be. It's just explaining how things came to be, how he met the characters, how he got the Millennium Falcon. But even after knowing all that, does that mean it's a bad film? Well, let's take a look. Well, for a little bit of a summary, the movie starts out in the world of Corellia, where a lot of people have to survive by stealing things for the most part. And while there, Han and his lover Kira try to escape a crime organization by trying to get on board a transport using smuggled hyperspace fuel. Han manages to escape, but Kira is captured, and of course Han says that he will return. He vows to return one day and try to save Kira. And at that point, Han decides to become a flight cadet in the Imperial Navy. And of course, when the officer asks what his surname is, Han says he doesn't have one. And so that's the point when the cadet or when the officer decides to give him the surname Solo, meaning alone. So I mean, right off the bat, that's how he got his actual name, Han Solo. Well, years later, Han is serving as an infantryman, and while there, he ends up encountering a criminal posing as a Imperial soldier named Tobias Beckett. And while there, he tries to persuade him to join him into doing a certain job so he'd get the money in order to get a ship in order to get back to Corellia. But of course, Beckett doesn't really trust him, and then he has Han get thrown into a pit with the monster, apparently, or the beast. But it turns out the beast is the Wookiee, Chewbacca. Because while in the pit, Han convinces Chewbacca to join up with him and team up to try to escape, which they did. And as Beckett and his crew were about to leave, he encounters Han once again and decides to take him on board as he sees that this job might need some help, some outside help, so he decides to go for it. And the whole mission was to get a shipment of coaxium, the hyperspace fuel, and the plan was going roughly okay until a group of pirates known as the Cloud Riders shows up and interfere with the plan, and unfortunately resulting in deaths of a couple of the crew members that Beckett has. Well, it was later revealed that Beckett was actually working for a crime boss, Dryden Voss, and the syndicate known as Crimson Dawn, and the whole shipment thing was a way for him to repay his debt. But because that failed, Beckett and Han paid a visit to Voss, and Han decided to suggest a risky plan to get some unrefined coaxium from the planet known as Kessel. And also, while they're on his yacht, Han finds out that Kira managed to escape in some fashion, but it's really more like she became the top lieutenant for Dryden. And so Voss decides to have Kira accompany them for the mission. And of course, the first thing they needed was to get a fast working ship. And so they paid a visit to, Lando Calrissian, surprisingly. And while there, Han challenges Lando to a card game, Sabacc, to try to wait for a ship. Of course, Lando cheats, and of course, Han loses. But surprisingly, Lando decides to go with the plan and decides to accompany them and using the Millennium Falcon, the iconic Millennium Falcon, as their new ship. Well, they eventually reached the planet Kessel, and the goal was to try to infiltrate the mine to smuggle out the coaxium. And apparently Lando's personal droid, L337, decides to create a slave revolt to instigate to kind of create commotion so that Han and Chewie could actually go in the mine and steal the coaxium, which in the end it does work, albeit there's a lot of firefights going on at the outside, but unfortunately L3 is damaged, unfortunately destroyed in the process. And as they were trying to leave the planet, the Imperial forces managed to catch up to them, and they tried to stop the Millennium Falcon. And of course, Han's plan was to pilot into the Maelstrom to avoid the blockade. But of course, they had to use L3's navigational computer to try to navigate their way through the whole Maelstrom. But afterwards, though, they land on the planet Severine, I think it was, in order to process the coaxium so that it wouldn't be unstable and explode. While on Savarine, the crew gets discovered by the Cloud Riders once again, but they find out that the Cloud Riders are not a group of pirates, but instead they are a group of rebels trying to prevent the Empire from gaining the upper hand in the war. And I guess Han, after understanding and kind of feeling sympathetic to their cause, he decides to join the Cloud Riders by trying to trick Voss into giving him what he thinks was fake coaxium, I guess. But of course, Voss knew about the double cross from Beckett, apparently. But Han knew that Beckett was going to betray him, so he anticipated that by having the Cloud Riders disguised as regular civilians to try to take out Voss's personal guards out in the outside of the yacht. And after knowing that the guards were taken out, Beckett decides to betray everyone by stealing the coaxium himself and having Chewie as a hostage. And in the meantime, Kira ends up killing Voss, and Han then goes after Beckett. And while all this is taking place, Kira then informs Voss's superior, who turns out to be Darth Maul of all people, tells her the mission was a failure and that she was going to take up the new position as the boss, as the Voss's position in the Crimson Dawn Syndicate. Well, afterwards, Han catches up with Beckett, confronts him, shoots him, and him and Chewie manage to take the coaxium back to the Cloud Riders. And while they're the leader, Enfius Nest, asks if he wants to come with her in order to stop the Empire, in order to fight on the war against the Empire. But of course, Han decides to decline that offer. Instead, he wants to travel space on his own, and he meets up with Lando one last time for another rematch against Sabak in order to wager the Millennium Falcon once again. But of course, Han knew that he was going to cheat again and anticipated it and ends up winning the card game. And so with the Millennium Falcon, Han and Chewie then head for Tatooine as they heard about a big shot smuggler putting together a smuggling operation. Hint, hint. Well, in terms of pros, there are maybe a couple of things that kind of come on the top of my head. I guess first being the action scenes throughout the movie. I mean, of course, no lightsabers, no Jedis, no none of that, unfortunately. But we do get some impressive space fight scenes. How the Millennium Falcon tries to avoid the Imperial blockade and go into the Maelstrom, and then of course they have a couple of scenes of kind of an all-out war firefight, with blasters and explosions everywhere, which it wasn't pretty impressive. And of course there was the I guess in a way the final scene, I guess not really too much actiony, but I mean it still was there though. But then second, I had to say overall, it's probably the sense of nostalgia that you're going to get out of this film. I mean, it mainly focuses on the origins of Han, but it's just kind of great to see how he ends up meeting Chewbacca for the first time, and how he ends up meeting Lando for the first time, and being on board the Millennium Falcon, brand spanking new for the first time. It's not all run down how it was in like Episode 7. So I mean, it's a pretty good sense of nostalgia right there. Well, in terms of cons, unfortunately, there are a few of them for me. For one thing, the characters themselves. I know this is supposed to be an origin story of Han Solo, but they don't really explain much about it. I mean, it's just whatever they showed us in the film is just what they are, I guess. We don't really know too much about Han. It just he was a struggling orphan just trying to survive on the streets, I guess. But I mean, that's pretty much all we were gonna get out of it. Same thing with Kira. We don't know too much about her. We don't really know much about Chewie, except he was just captured by, he was just captured by the Imperial Army, I guess. And then of course nothing about Lando, except he's just a smug person who's kind of a cheater. But that's all we're gonna get out of the film itself. The second thing I would say is the plot itself is a little bit on the predictable side. Well, I mean, it's one big giant smuggling operation for the most part, or at least a couple of smuggling operations. And honestly, the plot itself is just a little bit on the predictable side, where you know who's gonna come out victorious over this entire thing. So, and really, it's nothing. It's just nothing really that original, unfortunately. It's just nothing really too original from what it is. The third thing I had to say is the more or less the main villain of the movie, Dryden Voss. The big times, the big boss of the Crimson Dawn Syndicate. For the whole smuggling of the coaxium. He's not as threatening. I mean, he's kind of more just empty threats than anything else. I mean, he's no Count Dooku or the Emperor, nothing like that. He's nowhere near as threatening as those guys. So he's just more of like a hollow villain than anything else. And then the fourth, I'll have to say, is somewhat of the, I guess, the cliffhangers that they left in the film itself, or well, the cliffhangers and also the unresolved issues at hand, I guess, best way to put it. But what I mean by that is after Dryden Voss was killed off by Kira, and she ends up taking his place as the boss of the Crimson Dawn Syndicate, it makes me want to know what happens to her after that. I mean, do we ever see her again? I mean, she never appeared in Rogue One or episode 4. So, question is, did she even survive the war, or do we ever see her again? No idea there. And then also with the introduction of Darth Maul, once again, I'm kind of questioning where is he in Rogue One or Episode 4? I mean, it doesn't really explain any of that. It's like this is all sequel bait for. It feels like this is just all sequel bait, really, for a possible new installment for. Maybe this could be like a new trilogy on its own. Maybe I don't know. It's just not really clear as to what happens to these characters. Well, overall, Solo, a Star Wars story, I'd say it's, I guess, really pretty much what you expect. It's just Han Solo in his younger days, just, trying to make a living for the most part. I mean, that kind of boils down to it, really. It's just a standalone story that really doesn't make any impact or has any effect in the actual main story of Star Wars itself. It kind of just feels like it's just there, really. But maybe that's kind of the point, since Han Solo was killed off in Episode 7, they were trying to get a way to have more Han Solo in Star Wars universe, I guess. Which, I mean, I guess it's fine, but, in the end, it's just there, really. I guess with that, I would give it a final score of a 6 out of 10. Just a little bit above average. I mean, I'd say if you just want a sense of nostalgia and a little bit of action, I guess go for it. But honestly, you're really not missing too much by skipping it. I mean, again, it's just there. Alright, guys, this is DevilHunterXYZ, and until next time.